St Benedict filters the best of the Eastern monastic spirituality over here into the West. He obliged the brethren forevermore to be exposed to the Eastern spirituality by having the conferences of Cassian read before Compline at the end of day. And there we have coming through the authentic spirit of the desert. In the desert, work is done at the deepest possible level, producing the white martyrdom of the monastic life, which to some extent took the place of red martyrdom at the cessation of persecution. The will is the Holocaust. And St Benedict sees it well. He wants a total sacrifice. And the effect is the truth of the soul. The soul is no longer in illusion. L'humilité est la vérité. Humility is truth. The illusion of pride is that of Satan. I will not serve. I own my qualities. And so it is that we find St Benedict working in a whole school of service of the Lord to make sure that the souls are brought to that state which will make them ready for union with God in this life and intimacy with Him forevermore in the next. Humility then is essential, and he gives us 12 degrees of it. Firstly, to have before one's eyes at all times the fear of God. Satan had lost that fear. Initially, he didn't think that there would be anything like hell. It did not exist. He seems to have dreamt of his own headship of some reign. He got it. But what was his surprise when he got it in the place that then came into existence, where he still is and will be with his minions forevermore. And he uses pride, the absence of the fear of God, to get as many possible as he can with him, even to this day. One seems to think, using the verse of St John, that one can bypass humility or absence of any form of fear by a superior notion of love, which is, as it were, far higher. But then, if there is no fear at all, it is a form of pride. And it is certainly a form of pride and illusion to think that we can love God and get away with all kinds of sins without precisely that fear of God. It is a form of spirituality which is our own. I do my own thing and I call it spirituality. But there is no fear of God. I reign. Precisely, non serviam. I will not obey. Illusion in the spiritual life. Fear of God is to be seen in concrete absence of willingness to sin. The second is not to love one's own will. This can be detected in the consecrated life, in the priesthood. A situation might be in which someone is doing very well in his ministry, in his own competence, in the role that he's got used to, and then suddenly he's asked to relinquish it and go somewhere else or do something else. If his intention is purely vertical, he will find that it is quite equal, for then the will of God is being manifested, and all that matters to him is that divine will. If he's attached to his own will, there'll be all kinds of reactions, noises, protestations, all for God, all with high vision of good to be done. But the bottom line is that the will is not handed over. The third is to submit oneself in all obedience for the love of God to the superior, imitating the Lord, of whom the Apostle said he was obedient even unto death. The word obedience, in Latin obedientia, has the root of ob, turning towards, deflecting towards, and audire, listening. Gehörsamkeit in German has the same root of listening, hören, and also obbedienza in Italian. We cannot get away from this notion of not talking at Jesus present in the superior, but listening to Jesus in the superior. And that vision which sees in the superior Jesus and hears in his voice Vox Christi. If truly we love Jesus and have a supernatural vision, then it's enough for one syllable to be said, and the will is inclined, the will is bent, the will precisely in sacrificial mode is given, and there is no resistance. I want it with all my heart, Lord. It is your slightest desire which is sufficient for me. The fourth is to obey hard, painful orders without turning back. There can be a situation where a person is given a role which, humanly speaking, is not gratifying, is not glorified. But he has a limited vision if he doesn't see the glory that is being offered by the sacrificed will, for then he truly belongs to God. And who knows the merit of that compared with apparently efficacious activity directly involved with souls. A supernatural vision is desired by the Lord in such a way that, as in an army, for it to work perfectly, each one has to be obedient. There is no hope of winning a battle if there is no complete order under the authority given by God. By the way, Satan knows it well. There is a perfect order of obedience in hell and in the dominion of hell on earth. The demons all follow orders. The fifth is not to hide, but humbly to confess to one's abbot. Now that is the father figure. Abbas is the root of father, avi in Hebrew. All his bad thoughts, those that arise in his heart, and those committed, those faults committed in secret. It's called in the Desert Fathers paresia, from two roots, pan, or, and rein, the root of speaking, of flowing, of uttering. Rhema is a word, it's something uttered that flows out. And the opening of one's heart, of one's conscience to the abbot in the East is very important. In the West, it developed in the role of the novice master and the confessor, but there is an important role by the abbot himself still of engendering souls, because he has a special charism. The Holy Spirit gives him that grace of state, and he has, from that Holy Spirit, the capacity somehow to be prompted and to see what is going on and what to say. And if we do not have that vision, then we will hide things. And the devil loves to hide things and to keep them from the eyes of the superior. And so it is that suddenly a brother goes away, maybe after years, because he didn't speak at the right time. Once something is revealed, even if it is humiliating, the very act of being humble and revealing what is shameful is meritorious, and the demon of pride is driven away. The sixth is that the monk should be content in all lowliness and nakedness, and that in all that he is commanded, he judges himself a bad, unworthy worker. It's that gospel verse that we are to consider ourselves unprofitable servants. That comes directly from the gospel, and if we lived it, we would not be so attached to our career. Unprofitable servants. I have been reduced to nothing. He loves to cite the Psalms. The seventh is not only to utter with one's lips that one is the most miserable, but also to believe it with all one's heart. If we saw our misery in some way, in a supernatural, divine way, we would not be able to be so occupied with others. At one time, St Margaret Mary Alacoque had a moment of vainglory, and she was given a vision immediately of the ugliness of her soul, and she almost died. If we saw the ugliness of our soul, we would be horrified. One day, perhaps not far away, there will be an illumination of conscience, and there we will be very occupied with our own soul, very concerned, and far less concerned with others, because to spend much time judging others is to indicate that we have not taken care of our own. The eighth is that the monk do nothing that he has not been commanded to do by the rule, the common rule of the monastery, and the example of the seniors. In school days, I had hoped to go straight from the sixth form to Greenwich Abbey, and I found myself before the abbot there one time, and he had called me in to say that they wanted me to go to university, that I could spend the holidays with them if I wanted to, but he did warn me this, and it never left me. There must be no singularity. It was directly against the rule. He was afraid of personal penances not authorized and not fitting in. And that humility of not drawing attention to oneself is very Benedictine. It's essential in community. But it's also essential in general. A person who is full of himself succeeds indirectly always in drawing attention to himself. the very fact of asking permission to do an extra penance means the merit is guaranteed, and the sacrifice is already done on the level of the will, even should it not be granted. There can be a lot of pride and vainglory in our own penances invented, and the proof is that we don't accept the penances that Providence then sends: illness and pain, humiliation and upset. The ninth is that the monk know how to retain his tongue and keep silence without saying anything, as long as he is not questioned, interrogated, asked. That was actually given to a mystic way back in the Middle Ages. She was instructed by the Lord not to speak unless questioned. It actually gives a huge liberty. We don't have to open our mouth and contribute to every conversation. We can gain a lot of freedom by letting the conversation happen and keeping our own interior peace. And by the way, silence is essential to St Benedict. Taciturnitas. He does not easily give permission to talk. And that's why the Trappist reform took it very seriously, following the Cistercian origins, when in the new monastery, Molesmes, Novum Monasterium, there was a direct return to the literal following of the rule, and silence was perceived to be essential, hence perpetual silence. It's very freeing, completely alone with God, seen only by Him, rather like Sister Nazarena, a recluse in Rome with Camaldolese. She would never let anyone see her face, only Jesus. The 10th is not to be inclined or ready to laugh, for it is written, the idiot, when he laughs, raises his voice. St Benedict does condemn loud, raucous laughter, and it is part of his dignitas, this dignity which should be an elevated mode of being in the monastery, and it all maintains the pax benedictina, the Benedictine peace, which characterizes the cloister, because in his vision the whole of the monastery is the Domus Dei, the house of the Lord, and should not be, therefore, a different compartment, that it's all a continuation of the angelic area of the church. And he does remind those in church that they're in conspectu angelorum, in the presence of the angels, singing psalms, and he does want them to come out not crashing into normality, but gliding out and gliding in such a way that there is one mode all day. And even then, in the cloister, there should not be a profanity coming in. St Bernard of Clairvaux, when he was going from the cloister to the church, taking holy water, he would say to his worries, remain here. The font of holy water, that is, and I will take you up again upon coming out. So the church was entirely divine in orientation, and his duties, which were great, could be done in peaceful mode without impinging on his union with God and the angels in church. The home was therefore bathed in serenity, and the work did not become purely work, but an extension of praise. Ad maiorem Dei gloriam. And if that goes away, the work becomes merely a mechanical regime, not gaining merit. It has to be done, therefore, in contemplative mode. What is contemplative mode? Interiority, protected by silence. It's not a recreation. The 11th is the monk, when he talks, does so gently and without laughing, humbly and seriously, in few words, reasonably and without bursts of voice. According to what is written, the wise man can be recognized in that he talks little. Dignitas. And there is a dignity about the consecrated soul, which is perceived when that soul is coming out of prayer. He is still in mode and commands respect with few words, without added decibels. The 10th, or rather the 12th, is that the monk always manifests humility present in his heart, in his body also, visibly unto others. It is to say that at the divine office, which he calls of course the Opus Dei, work of God, in the oratory, that's the word he uses for the chapel, the church, and everywhere in the monastery, notice, in the garden, on the way, in the fields, and anywhere at all, sitting, walking, standing, he is always in a somewhat humble posture. There's a difference between expansive noisiness and this attitude of interiority, rather like St Joseph at Knock, not drawing attention to himself, but always in a suppliant mode before the Divine Majesty. And that can be found in Mount Athos. They are always moving their lips when working, saying the Jesus Prayer. And what is the Jesus Prayer? A reminder that we are nothing before the great King that we serve.